Good evening, everybody out there in Facebook land. Paul Sterling here. Welcome to Compassionate Talk. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the 7 essential skills to make your relationship remarkable. And they've never been more important than right now. So I will give you a little bit about how this whole broadcast comes about. The Compassionate Talk is something that was really the brainchild of a good friend of mine, the head of Love Coach Academy, a guy named Scott Katamas, who teaches love coaches how to become love coaches and runs an academy for that. And is an amazing, empathetic soul. And him and Debbie G, who is the head of Spirituality Gone Wild, and I got together and said, let's do this. Let's make a contribution. You know, when people started to be sheltered at home, we wanted to ask what could we do that would make a difference. So we decided to do this broadcast live every day at either 9 a.m. in the morning West Coast time or 6 p.m. at night, and talk about the tips, tools, techniques, those things that we can use to help people be more connected, more compassionate, more empathetic with each other. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the 7 essential relationship skills and the 7 issues. So there's 7 issues here, and you may want to grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and you may want to stay all the way to the end. If you stay to the end, I'm going to tell you how you can get a free copy of Argue Less, Love More, my best-selling book on Amazon. I am incredibly proud of this book and the impact it's had on people. So let's dive in a little bit. So I'm going to tell you a tiny bit about me. Let's see if I can get the, yes, here we go. And then we'll dive into you. So what I want to do is look at the moments and the mentors that made my life the way it is right now in just a few minutes on that, to help you understand who I am, where I came from, and why I teach what I teach. And part of the reason I teach what I teach is these people right here. This is my dad, Robert Foley, and Diana Rivers, my mom. And this was many, many years ago, before I was actually born. And I think I was even conceived there. This is in a boat shed in Maine. And they loved each other immensely. And they didn't have the 7 relationship skills that they needed, of the tools in the relationship. The marriage broke up after 18 years. And the interesting thing is that when I got a divorce, I didn't realize how long my parents had been together. And when I got a divorce, I called my mom up and said, how long were you two together? And she said, 18 years. I said, wow, that's really strange. I got a divorce and we had been together for 18 years. And it's sort of like we have to learn how to identify and interrupt the patterns that are sabotaging our relationships. So I'm going to talk to you about what supports your relationships, what sabotages them, and would love to interact with you. And if there's any specific questions you have, you can type that in. And what I want you to also look at is, after 25 years of coaching couples, I've narrowed it down to 7 core issues that create about 80 or 90% of your upsets and problems. What I'd like to do is hear from you what causes most of the upsets and problems you have. And I'm going to see how well I'm doing with technology, if I can actually look at the screen and talk to you all at the same time. And hopefully I can figure that out. And I'm giving it a try right now. We'll see if I make that work. Okay. Here we go. Comments. If there's comments, leave them in the box and I will deal with it. So what causes the issues? I'll dive into that in a second, a tiny bit more about my history. So my dad, Irish alcoholic, drunk, not alcoholic. He wasn't like a slobbering drunk. He could get very uncomfortable, or I would be uncomfortable around him. And he could get pretty angry at times. So I learned not, oh, that's me, by the way. God, I'm adorable. I had more hair back then than I do now. But, and that's with my older brother, Kevin. And I grew up, you can tell we were 2 years apart in that picture. And I was the same height as him, and it drove him crazy. By the time we hit our teen years, he did everything he could to keep me down. And it was painful growing up around him. There was a lot of violence. And it wasn't until I moved away at age 17, headed to Alaska, became a commercial fisherman. And the year before, well, yeah, the year before my brother killed himself, he came up and worked with me in Alaska. And it was a turning point in our relationship. And I'm overjoyed that he came up and we were able to heal our upbringing. And I'm heartbroken that he was in a place where he decided that his best choice was to kill himself. Huh. So intense way to start this conversation. Okay, I left home at age 17 to get away from the violence, the upsets, the misunderstanding, the poor communication skills that happened in my house. And by the time I was 21, we bought this boat. This is the Olympic King, Thorne Tasker, who was a good friend of mine and my partner for years, business partner. We went to Alaska together, and then at age 21, went to Florida, bought this boat, brought it around to Alaska, and I was a commercial fisherman up there. And for 18 years, oh yeah, that's me, Badass Paul. And then something happened. I met this guy, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it sort of opened up my mind and my heart that I could change my destiny. I could change the way I thought. And then he introduced me to Tony Robbins. And I ended up being on Tony's support staff, and then ended up being one of his employees. So Tony was my boss. And I look at my life before Tony and after Tony. It was transformational. And I learned a lot from him. And then I studied a bit with his teacher, a guy named Richard Bandler. I call Richard the Hell's Angel of modern psychology. He was one of the originators of neuro-linguistic programming. Another turning point for me, and then I'll get into these 7 things. So you definitely want to have a piece of paper and pencil ready, and leave me some comments on what has been the biggest issue for you in relationships. Okay, back to my history. This is a guy named Marshall Rosenberg. He is no longer alive, but he was an amazing man. He created something called nonviolent communication, and I've studied with him a lot. I spent almost a month with him in Sweden at one point, and it was because of him I wrote this book, the Argue Less, Love More book, after reading his book on nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication is really about what to do in communication, and Argue Less, Love More is there are 5 triggers in communication. So how do you avoid the triggers? How do you have tough conversations and not avoid the issues, but you avoid the triggering each other? And what do you do when you do get triggered? So Marshall was a big turning point for me. Again, that's where I had more hair. Another big turning point for me is, this is Byron Katie. She wrote a book called Loving What Is. She wrote a bunch of books. She's very amazing, prolific writer, and a huge soul. And that is in front of my house in Colorado. That is my peace tree, because that's what I'm about, is making peace here, and peace in relationship, peace in life. And that is my dad. Just before he passed away, he had asbestosis, hardening of the arteries of the lungs, and slowly he suffocated. And because of nonviolent communication, we were able to resolve an awful lot of stuff in our lives. And what I want to do is give you the tools, the communication tips, tools, techniques to resolve issues in your life, so you can heal upsets, misunderstandings, hurt feelings with the people you love the most, because the people you love the most are often the most difficult to talk to. I think that's the last one of those. Yeah. Huh. All right. So I'm going to switch over and I'm going to reveal the 7 core issues and then look at what do you need to stop doing? What do you need to start doing to go from having a relationship that is where you're silently settling and suffering and it's not giving you the love, the compassion, the intimacy that you want. It's not meeting your needs. What changes can you make, do you want to make to transform your relationship? So let's look at the 7 core issues and then what to do about them. And while I'm doing this, if you want to type in what has been the biggest challenges for you in relationships, that would be great to see up here. And I think I can see your comments on this. This is, I'm using something called StreamYard. So here we go. First one. Ta-da! It's all about communication. And a lot of times what we do is we communicate. Let me see. I've got lots of notes. I'm going to do it here. When we communicate from 3 different places. And this is critical. When triggered, so I'm going to put that caveat in there, when triggered, where do you communicate from? Here, here, or here? This one is called collapsed. And what collapsed is like I have a great puppy. Well, it's about a year old, and he's a Queensland Heeler, Springer Spaniel mix, and he's small. Well, he's not real small, but he's pretty small. And we walked on the beach the other day, and our dog that may weigh 60 pounds, 50 pounds, ran into 3 Great Danes. And those dogs probably each weighed at least 300 pounds. And he ran up really enthusiastic. And then when he saw how big they were, he basically collapsed. And a lot of times we do that in communication. When we get triggered, we collapse. This is when we move into being a martyr, when we pull away. And or the other thing we can do is we can get combative. So if you look at it, you can either collapse or combative. Both of these are reactive. And by the way, I was once told if you don't know how to spell a word in at least 3 different ways, you're not being creative. So I'm going to give you some very creative spelling here. I am dyslexic, and I thought, wow, I'll be a public speaker. So now I get to spell in public. It's really challenging. All right. So when we get triggered, where do we go? Do we collapse, which basically my needs don't matter, your needs matter? Do we get combative? My needs are the only ones that matter, and I don't care about you. Or do we get to this third one? Compassionate. And that's where we get compassionate, and it's also courageous. I use, because courageous is to be brave, is to be vulnerable, is to share from the heart. So this is one way of communicating. And down here, we start at, when something goes wrong, we start in denial. It didn't go wrong. Nothing's wrong. This is what happens. You can look at it politically. Nothing's wrong. Or you can look at it and go, in our family, no problem. And then we move up, whoops, to lay blame. Lay blame, not my fault it's happened. We pointing the finger in all these different directions. And then we justify. The reason I did my behavior, and this is excuse land, where we end up in excuses and keep moving up, denial, lay blame, justify, and then shame. That's when we feel like we're broken, something's wrong, and end up in shame in our communication. And lastly, well, not lastly, we want to quit. Something's wrong with me, or we quit communication, we quit the relationship, we quit, we are done. Then, if we get above the line, so this I'm just going to call the line, we take and we become responsible. So what I want you to think about is in relationships when something goes wrong, and I've been doing this for 25 years, things go wrong in relationships. People get their feelings hurt, agreements get broken, trust gets broken. There's all sorts of challenges. The question is, how do you communicate? We were watching this great show the other night. I think it's called The Bold Ones on Hulu. And it's about this women's magazine and all of the changes going on. And at one point, one of the stars has a conflict with one of the board members. And at the end of the conflict, I'm not going to give you too much detail, but the board member came up and just said, I was wrong. What did he do? He could have done all of this stuff, all of the reasons, the excuses for what he did. Instead, he just took responsibility and it was over in seconds. So when there's an upset around your house, the people, and this is the line, do people play below or above the line? And another, down here, below the line is BSW, bad, stupid, wrong. It's shame. And what happens is when we communicate below the line, we push away the people that we love. So communication is one of the big issues, one of the first issues, because if you can transform the way you can communicate, you can transform your relationship with almost anyone. And right now, it is one of the most stressful times for communication. So that's a big one, how to get above the line. And the other thing is we want to make sure that our partners feel it's HUV, heard, understood, and valued, so that you can make them feel heard, understood, and valued. And that's what you want when you speak, heard, understood, and valued. And we'll dive in deeper, maybe even in this call, but I want to make sure I get through all 7. So this one creates huge amounts of problems. We need to stop playing below the line, which is bad, stupid, wrong, shame, blame, guilt. We're trying to find out whose fault it is. Rather than taking responsibility, getting above the line, making sure that everybody feels heard, understood, and valued. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So drum roll, please. What is the next big issue? Needs. And here's the thing. We live in a culture of needs shame. And what that means is one of the big insults we can give people is you are so needy. And right now, if somebody says to me, you're so needy, I'm like, you are so right. I am embracing my needs. I have a need, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, water, community, those things. And then there's another set of needs for a healthy long-term relationship. And I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little controversial. So there is only one reason to be in a relationship. Can you type it in? What do you think the one reason to be in a relationship is? And it's rare that I say this like a universal, like I know the one thing. I get it. That can sound a little pompous and all that. And I'm going to risk it. I'm going to say I know the one thing that the reason to be in a relationship. Okay. So here it is. The one thing to be in a reason to be in a relationship is to get your needs met. Um, the problem is we live in a culture of needs shame. We're afraid that if we talk about our needs, we will sound needy and be less attractive. And there are 10 top needs. And when I studied with Tony Robbins, he was talking about 6 essential needs. When I studied with Marshall Rosenberg, he was talking about over 100 needs. I've come in between. And these are not at all intended to be the only 10 needs. But if you get these 10 needs met in your relationship, it will transform it. And I can go through that in a minute. The challenge is what we need to do is stop, because there's a stop here. This is the stop column. This is the start column. So we need to stop. Needs shaming. And stop feeling like the needs are a that's meant to say burden, so that we can get away from your needs feeling like a burden. We don't want to do that. We want your needs to feel precious. And the ability to embrace your needs. So going from a place where needs feel like a burden, they're shameful, and insult you have is you are so needy. I can't believe how needy you are. To where you can embrace your needs, you can notice them, name them, negotiate them. You know what the top 10 needs are. Like one need we have is for certainty in a relationship, and we also have a need for variety. We have a need to feel significant, like we're a priority, a need for love and connection, a need for attraction. We have a need for growth and for contribution, and 3 forms of intimacy. We have a need for physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy. And if you can get those and start measuring, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how are your needs getting met? It will transform your relationship. So number 1, communication. Number 2, needs. Number 3, drum roll please, conflicts. And so conflicts were dangerous in my house. And so I did everything I could, and I'm still wired to not enjoy conflicts. Most of us are. But the thing is, I should make a mark in there. That is lean out, lean away from, avoid conflicts. If we avoid conflicts, we avoid the underlying message that's in conflicts. Conflicts are a chance to uncover our needs or to discover what's important to our partner. If we can meet conflict with curiosity, it will transform conflicts. And then what we want to do is, rather than lean out, we want to learn how to lean in. Because when people are snuggled in bed at night and you think that your partner is listening to you and hearing you, it's rare that somebody would yell. It's only when we don't feel heard, understood, or valued that we raise our voice. So if we get curious, what's going on with them? What are they needing? What beautiful need of theirs isn't getting met right now? What beautiful need of theirs isn't getting met? Lean into that. Ask them questions. Be courageous. that will turn conflicts around. Whoops, this is misspelled. Probably one of many misspellings. Wounds and triggers. And what do we do about wounds and triggers? There's a Carolyn Mays, who's a great healer and teacher, said that when we all get wounded, but we have a choice here. Do we get bitter or do we get better? And let me give you an example of that. This right here is my brace. And about, God, it's 2 years, probably 3 years now, that I went over the handlebars of my mountain bike and broke the fourth metacarpal. And that's a bone in the back of your hand. And they put this brace on. And the brace was great for protecting me for a while. And the thing is, if I kept it on for more than the allotted 3 months of healing, it would have ended up starting to, my muscles would have started atrophying. So what happens a lot of times when we get wounded and we start to get bitter and we put up boundaries, or not boundaries, we put up borders, we put up walls to protect ourselves. And that might be great for the first 3 months to protect our heart and deal with that. And after that, though, we get bitter and our lives get smaller. And we're trying to punish the rest of the world by pushing it away rather than getting better, being with the feelings. Because to heal it, you need to feel it. And what the things that we do to avoid feeling make us bitter, like alcohol, drugs, porn. I'm not making any of it wrong, but it's just, if it's a way to avoid feeling our feelings, it's going to end up backfiring on us. And that was a lot of what happened, I think, in my dad's life. The feelings he wasn't willing to feel, that he used alcohol to suppress, still eroded him from the inside out. So the more wounded we are, the more triggerable we are. And how much fun is it to talk to someone who's triggered? And what I want to do is teach you, in the triggers, there are 3 levels. A. The first level, so this is like the normal right here. This is if you're calm and normal. The first trigger is alert. Somebody says something, a comment strikes you, something goes on, and you go to alert. The next one up, you go to alarm. The next one up, you're at attack. And by the time you've hit attack, it's hard to calm down again. So it's really important when you're dealing with somebody and they get triggered. And here's what happens. When we get triggered, we go into our reptile brain. If you think about it, we communicate from either our heads, when we talk about logic and reason and facts and figures, our heart, which is about connections and emotions, or our hurt, which says that reptile brain. And when we're in our reptile brain, we're only looking for, where's the enemy? What do I need to do to protect myself? What can I do to feel safe? So that's what's going on there. We want to catch it early, maybe when it's at alert or alarm, and tell your partner, wow, I'm starting to get triggered. Let's slow down. Let's back up. Can you hold me right now? Can we go slower? I'm not feeling resourceful right now. Can we talk about it in the morning? So again, communication issue number 1, above the line or below the line. We want to stop doing below the line, stop doing bad, stupid, wrong, stop shaming each other. If we get above the line, we want both of us to feel heard, understood, and valued. We want to stop need shaming, feeling like your needs are a burden, and start making your needs precious. So my needs matter. Conflict. Do we lean out and try to avoid conflict and run away from it? Or do we become curious and lean in and try to figure out what precious need our partner is trying to get met? Why are they so upset? If they're that upset, it must be a really important need that they're battling for. Wounds and triggers, do we get bitter or do we get better? And the more bitter we are, the more triggerable we are, and the less available we are in a relationship. If you clear up the past, you're available for the present, and it creates a possibility for the future. If someone's not wanting to commit to a relationship with you, one of the reasons, I'll just say one of the reasons, is because so much of the past upsets, misunderstandings, conflicts are in the present, but they don't want to permatize it and make it into the future and make a commitment. They're hoping it will change and go away. So what's number 5? Number 5 is trust. So we're either always undermining trust or we're building trust. And things that happen that undermine trust is, well, I'll start with what builds trust. In a relationship, what I want to know is, can I trust you with my boundaries? Will you respect my boundaries? Will you respect my needs? Will you respect my requests? And will you have my back? And will you keep your word? So what undermines trust is when you don't keep your word, and there are explicit agreements where you keep or don't keep your word, or they're implicit agreements. Like a lot of times we have implied agreements that we haven't talked about, but if you break them, it will erode the foundation of the trust. Like, thou shalt not go through thy partner's wallet or purse without permission. See, most people would never say that, but most people, if you did it, it would be a breaking of the trust. It would undermine the trust. Thou shalt not look at each other's cell phones without permission or an agreement. Whatever it is, make sure that it's building the trust. And this is the supporting, this is sabotaging the relationship. This one, there's only 2 more. This is the 3 shades of intimacy. And hopefully, I'm not seeing the comments because I don't know that mine is set up for the comments, but I do know there are comments coming in. Thank you. Oh, I see Kendall's there. I see some other comments. And I'd love to hear which one of these is making the biggest impact on your relationship now or your past relationships. What wrecked it? So we will dive into a little bit more. The 3 shades of intimacy. A lot of times people think that intimacy is just about sex. Let me get rid of these. There is nothing wrong with sex. I love sex. But that's not the only part of intimacy. Intimacy has 3 shades. There is the There is a physical, emotional, and sexual side of intimacy, and the heartbeat of it is it's about connection. It's about vulnerability. It's about sharing what's alive in you. What are you feeling? And it's scary, and it's a muscle that needs to be developed and built. So 3 shades of intimacy. The last one here is differences. And so do we deal with differences in a way that divide us? And it's differences, difficulties, and decisions. It's the D's, the 3 Ds. Difficulties, differences, and decisions. Do we deal with them in a way that divide us, or in a way that brings us together and brings us closer? And a lot of times, couples never make a decision about how they're going to make decisions, and it ends up being an upset. And so there's an unspoken rule about who makes a decision. If I make more money, do I get to make the decisions? If I've got more power, do I get to make the decision? How are the decisions made, and are they made in a way that brings you closer or in a way that divides you? So in a minute, I'm going to let you know how you can get your free copy of the book. Let me just put that up now. And what I ask people to do is there is a survey, and the survey is going to go through these 7 areas, and you can start looking when you take the survey, where are your strengths, where are your superpowers, and what's your kryptonite, which is your weaknesses in the relationship, so that you can develop them. The last part about this is that these are all the skills, but the skills are all run by something called your ROS, your relationship operating system. And I know I have given a ton of information here. So you may want to watch this a couple of times, replay it, and go through it so you can get it clear. And when we do the big training, we'll go slower, step by step, interact with you. All right, are you ready for your ROS? Because there are hundreds, if not thousands of things that impact and influence your relationship, but there's one thing that is running it. It's called your ROS, your relationship operating system. That is built up of your habits, patterns, and beliefs. Your habits, patterns, beliefs. All 3 of those are unconscious to us until they get pointed out somehow. So here's why you're on this call right now or watching this Facebook Live. There's probably one reason. Well, there could be 2 reasons. You could be bored and nothing else is happening, or you could want to make a change in your relationship. You could want a different result. So what controls the results you get in your relationship is the actions you take. And there are 2 different sets of actions here that I'm going to be talking about: the patterns that are either supporting you or sabotaging you, and your habits that are either supporting you or sabotaging you. And look at, like people get in a relationship and 6 months later they get bored and they go have an affair, or they get, it's like there's all these patterns, or patterns and habits are similar. The difference between a pattern and a habit, at least the way I understand it, patterns are more long-term, like, oh, it might take 6 months, it might take a year for the pattern to reveal itself. Habits are something we might do daily. And it's like looking at what are the habits and patterns in your relationship that support you, that help you move forward, and what are the ones that get in the way and sabotage your relationship. So if you want a different result, you need to take different actions. What controls your actions is your beliefs. And we have supporting beliefs and we have sabotaging beliefs. This is your relationship operating system. It is one of the most critical things. This system is operating these tools. So you have just gotten dropped into an incredibly sophisticated oversimplification of relationships and 25 years of studying these. So it's really important to look at your beliefs and see whether or not they're supporting you being in the kind of a remarkable relationship you want, or they sabotaging you. The same thing with all of these different areas. Does your communication support or sabotage? What do you need to stop doing? What do you need to start doing? So Hopefully this has been helpful. It's a little shorter than I normally go, like an hour, but um, I wanted to just make sure that I reached out and gave you the essence of it. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, and only get it if you really want to read it. Don't just fill up your computer with more information. It's an amazing book, and it goes through five, you can see them here, 5 different communication mistakes to avoid. So I don't want to give you more information. If you want the book, go to arguelesslovemore.net/ask, fill out the survey, and it will help you get clearer which of these is an issue that you might want to work on. If you want to build your skills, if you want to build these skills, if you want some help, some personal, private relationship coaching, go to arguelesslovemore.net/clarity, and you can get a coaching session, half-hour session with me. And that would be an amazing thing. We get clear where you are, where you want to go, what's in the way. So thank you very much. Oh, one last thing. Now a word from our sponsor. I want to make sure that I mentioned it at the beginning, mention it at the end. Compassionate Talk, which is every day at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. And there's different speakers, different topics. Is a group that was put together. Scott Katamas invited me, Paul Sterling from arguelesslovemore.net, and Debbie G from Spirituality Gone Wild to put together a group of people to do these calls. So if this helps you, make sure to let friends, family, everybody that you think would be helped, let them know. And we do talks. I specialize in couples. There's people that specialize in how to apply compassion to recovery, roommates, parenting, all sorts of issues. But join us at either 9 a.m. or 6 p.m. daily. Thank you for your time and energy. I look forward to seeing you somewhere in the near future. Let me know what you got out of it. Which of these has been the biggest issue for you? And what was your biggest insight? I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Have a great night.